I'm tired of explaining to people one by one why going to Mars makes no sense. So this is going to be the reference video I send people from now on when they repeat this super dumb idea that comes out of science fiction and is fiction for a reason. First, let's talk about the reasons why people think that Mars colonization does make sense. And there are some good ones if you don't know all the stuff we know now. First off, early astronomers looked up at Mars and they said this planet has a 24-hour day, roughly, which is almost the same as Earth, right? There's 24 and a half hours on Mars. So clearly it's meant for human habitation. They also saw huge canyons they thought were canals built by aliens or something. They also thought this meant that Mars had water, which it has very little of. And there were religious reasons as well. They thought that if God created this planet, it had to be for a reason, right? So all this early sci-fi had aliens living on Mars and humans able to go to Mars. Even modern sci-fi has humans able to go to Mars because if you don't know anything, it seems reasonable that we should be able to do that. And there's also just the idea that Elon Musk keeps repeating, which is very stupid for reasons I'm about to get into, that Mars is Earth's backup planet and is also a bridge for humanity to colonize the rest of the galaxy. It is none of that, because we know a lot more now than those early astronomers that first looked at Mars. Here's the first problem with Mars colonization. There is no soil. This is a bigger problem than you might think. On The Martian, the guy goes out and he mixes like his poop with the regolith on Mars, which is essentially, you can think of regolith like gravel or sand. There's no nutrients in it. Actually, sand on Earth is more nutritious than regolith is, right? But in The Martian, if by mixing his poop with it, well, now it has organic matter and he can grow potatoes. That does not work, because not only does regolith have no nutrients and a very different chemical composition than soil on Earth, it also includes in that chemical composition literal poison for your body that we have no way to remove. Think about it this way. Inside the rocks, not just the sand and the gravel, but also the rocks on Mars, there is poison in every layer that we've looked at. And in order to get rid of that in a way that you might actually be able to live on Mars without accidentally breathing in dust that would kill you, even if you were able to grow anything in the soil, which again, we can't do, you would have to grind up the rock, leach the poison out of it, which again, we do not have the technology for. We don't even know how to do this, even if it were economically efficient to grind up the surface of Mars and leach poison out of it. We don't have the technology to do it. And without doing that, anything you grow on Mars will kill you. Breathing the air on Mars will kill you. But that's not really such a big problem, because there's no air on Mars to breathe, right? The atmosphere is extremely thin. It's something like 40 times thinner than Earth. And even if you do what Elon Musk says we should do, which is very stupid, just like most of Musk's ideas when it comes to anything that he's talking about lately, frankly, it wouldn't be the atmosphere we have on Earth. It would still be so much thinner, even if you nuke the poles. I mean, the nuclear radiation would be the smallest problem that you have, because the much bigger problem is that the air would be almost entirely carbon dioxide, and it would not, which again, just a reminder, air on Earth is 75% nitrogen, almost 20% oxygen. Right? There's none of that, essentially, in Mars's atmosphere, even once you nuke the poles, and it would still be much too thin to protect you from radiation, or breathe, or do anything, right? And you'd essentially have to ship in air from somewhere else, or somehow manufacture it on the planet, which again, we don't have the technology for, and is a very hard physical problem to solve, right? Like, we're not talking about billions of dollars, we're talking about trillions of dollars, or even maybe hundreds of trillions, because we don't have the technology for it. We have no idea how expensive it could get, right? Most difficult physical problems turn out to be harder than you think they are, right? So we just have no way to solve the atmosphere problem right now. But even if you could do that, now these first two issues are things that are hard technical problems, but they're technically probably solvable if you spent enough money doing it. It would be many times the current GDP of Earth. So it'd be centuries before we're able to even afford trying to do something like this. But maybe, given centuries, you would eventually solve them. Here's something that you can't solve. At least that with our current technology, maybe ever. Mars's gravity is 38% of Earth's. That will kill the human body. You cannot live on that planet. We would have to somehow genetically modify humans or something in order to survive in such low gravity. It would not be the same human species that survives on Earth. So you in your current physical body are not going to go to Mars. You're just not. You would die there. Okay? The only way that you can solve something like that, because we don't have a way to create artificial gravity, at least that we know of, there's maybe if we fund basic scientific research, which is exactly the kind of thing that Elon Musk is slashing right now in order to pay for his human trip to Mars, then we could eventually do some super high-tech sci-fi thing with artificial gravity. The only other way to boost Mars's gravity would be to crash other interstellar bodies and stuff into it, right? So like all these like asteroids and moons and planets and stuff, you could maybe with enough power, way more power than humanity currently has access to, crash these things into Mars and increase the gravity. But at that point, you're not talking about colonizing Mars. You're colonizing a completely different planet, which we manufactured. So sending humans to Mars right now tells you nothing about how easy or hard that would be. There's also just no sunlight on Mars. Very little. It's half power compared to Earth. So you're going to have, and Mars is extremely cold, by the way. It's colder than Antarctica. So you would face a huge uphill battle, even trying to warm the planet up to the point where it would be comfortable for humans to live, or even possible without like wearing a spacesuit. And even once you do that, you're not going to have access to as much power because the sun is so much weaker, right? It will always be a crappier planet to live on than Earth. And the final problem with going to Mars is that there's no valuable resources and there's no survival benefit to doing so. And this is really the biggest problem with going to Mars, right? Because the reason that humans go places is to make money or just in order to survive, right? In order to go to Mars, you might spend hundreds of trillions of dollars going there and trying to make it habitable at all, even inside of a space station, to the point that it could be self-sufficient, right? Even inside of like a completely enclosed environment, it might cost, $100 trillion or something just to make that self-sufficient for your survival thing or whatever, right? In case a comet hits Earth or whatever. And even at that point, it would just require constant upkeep from Earth in order to make it a place anyone would want to live, right? It would require constant resource investment. There's nothing they can export back to Earth to make going there worth it. And even if, and the other part of that is the survival part, right? It doesn't help make human survival more likely. It doesn't make it easier for us to colonize the rest of the galaxy or the rest of the universe, right? You would learn more, and it would be easier to launch a colony of humans into deep space than to colonize Mars, because at least in deep space, you could get an artificial gravity by spinning the spaceship around. Mars, you can't even do that. Okay, it's easier to build the little halo rings that they have in Halo than it would be to colonize Mars. And Mars has all of the same survival risks that Earth does. If there is a genocidal war that wipes out humanity, why would they leave your little Mars colony, which cost $100 trillion and only has 20 people living there? Why would they leave that alone? One nuke would take it out, right? Why would a solar flare or actually a bigger problem would be like a supernova, that would be like a bigger survival risk, is a supernova, right? Why would a supernova sterilize Earth but not Mars, right? With its much thinner atmosphere and much smaller planet. Like Mars would get sterilized just the same as Earth. Even if you made the atmosphere much thicker, it would be sterilized just the same as Earth, right? There's no survival benefit, no resources, no scientific stuff we would learn that would be useful. We might accidentally learn something useful, I guess. That actually is much rarer than people think. But even if that's your goal, is to accidentally learn useful things that might help humanity, just fund basic research, the kind of stuff that Elon Musk is slashing right now. That stuff might help humanity. Sending humans to Mars will not.